Thank you.
Yeah,
it's very good. You know, now that I've tried this, I don't think I can live without it.
ʻniːl, you want to talk about our world or another one?
This one.
Okay.
So actually a parallel universe to this one called Ames, Iowa, which is the town where I grew up. It's the home of Iowa State University, which is a school that in a lot of ways is similar to this one. The main difference being that unlike ASU, ISU is not embedded in a great big city, so it's a kind of a self-contained academic community out on the high prairie. And Ames, different universities develop different sort of areas of specialization depending on who's working there and what they're good at. And one thing that Iowa State got pretty good at in the middle of the 20th century was metallurgy. And so when metallurgy became a really important topic during the Manhattan Project, some of the people in Ames were called upon to make use of their skills in refining uranium. So I'm not talking about enriching uranium, which is a more difficult process and requires bigger equipment. I'm talking about the simple process of taking the ore that is mined out of the ground and producing a fairly pure sample of uranium from that. They needed it because a few hundred miles off to the east in Chicago, in a racquetball court, the world's first atomic pile was being constructed. The way this thing was built is basically a big cubical stack consisting largely of blocks of really pure graphite. And among the graphite was uranium in a sort of roughly spherical configuration. And based on the calculations that they had done with the samples of uranium that they had a pretty good idea of how big that sphere was going to have to be in order for them to get the critical reaction that they were looking for. So they built this thing up one layer at a time using the uranium that they could get, and at some point a new kind of uranium started coming in from my hometown, which is called Spedding's eggs. So Frank Spedding was a metallurgist who worked there, and he and some of the people he worked with had come up with a new way of refining uranium, which is based on the thermite reaction. So I don't know if you know about thermite. It's a very popular chemistry experiment among young and old pyromaniacs, but you take rust. I thought that would bring some people out of the woodwork. You take basically rust and aluminum and mix them together, and once you get it lit, which is difficult to do, but once it gets going, it's incredibly exothermic and it's spectacular, and you end up with molten metal all over the place. So anyway, it's a good way of getting oxygen stripped off of one metal and moving it over to another one, and that was what they needed to do in the case of refining this uranium. Of course, just making a big pile of powder out in the middle of the prairie and setting fire to it wasn't exactly the right way to go about it. And so they built these sort of crucibles, these really thick-walled crucibles in which they would mix the ingredients, and then they would weld it shut and set fire to the thing, and the reaction would take place inside. And much, much later, it would cool off to the point where they could go and open up the canister, and inside would be this beautiful little oval sort of this hardened puddle of uranium, hence the term Spedding's eggs. Not quite like cuckoo eggs, but much more powerful in a certain way. So these were then put on trucks and transported to Chicago and incorporated into the atomic pile. And these eggs were so much purer than the uranium that they had been working with up to that point that they actually had to change the design of the pile at that point. So if you look at a cross-section of that pile as it was finally built, the bottom part of it is a perfect geometric sphere, but the top part is a kind of flattened oblate sphere, because they realized that they didn't have to have as much uranium because they were getting better stuff from my hometown. So that was the kind of place that I grew up. There were kids in my Boy Scout troop whose dads had been present in that racquetball court when the reactor went critical. There were this is kind of a digression, but one of my favorite aspects of that experiment was that they were worried that it might go out of control, and so they had buckets full of a solution that was known to be a poison for this reaction, a very potent damper of this reaction. And so standing on top of the pile, they had graduate students holding buckets of this stuff, and their job was to dump this stuff into the pile if the needle went beyond a certain level, which it would do very, very quickly if it happened. But on no account were they to spill even a drop of it into the pile beforehand, because it would completely destroy the utility of the pile and they would have to rebuild it. So anyway, for the rest of the Manhattan Project and after the war, Ames was still a place where a lot of that kind of research went on. And I can remember going into, I think it was Spedding Hall at the university, and seeing under glass a wine bottle covered with the signatures of the people who were present when the experiment had succeeded. I don't know if it was there permanently or on loan, but it was one of these cheap Italian wine bottles that's in a little basket, and the scientists had all signed their names on the wicker surrounding the bottle. And later on, when I was in college, I worked as a research assistant in a lab there, and I can remember talking to a crusty old technician who liked to give the young guys a hard time. And he took a bar of metal about the size of a pencil out of an envelope on his desk, and he handed it to me. He said, "What do you think that is?" And I began weighing it in my hand and guessed all of the dense metals I knew of, like osmium, because I was a smart little physics major and I knew what all the heavy metals were. And when I had run down the list of all of them, he told me that I was holding a bar of uranium in my hand. So I kind of froze up for a second, and he snatched it out and stuffed it into an envelope and said, "You probably shouldn't hold that for very long." So with that as background, I'll quickly tell a story from my Boy Scout troop, just sort of going back to Bill's comments about getting a passion for science when you're young. Boy Scouts do all kinds of projects to learn about different things, and one of the projects that we were supposed to be doing was growing plants. And growing plants is a thing that happens quite a bit in Iowa, and so it didn't seem like a terribly interesting project on its own. And so some of the dads in our troop decided they were going to enliven the thing by adding a little sciencey twist. And so one of them got some corn seeds that were as close to sort of genetically identical as he could make them. They probably had all come off the same cob or something. And he took them across campus and gave them to one of the metallurgists, who went down into the hot room, buried deep below the building, and picked them up with a remote manipulator arm and put them over a thick lead glass wall and set them down next to a highly radioactive isotope for some period of time, and then plucked them back out, brought them to the safe side of the wall, and took them to our next Boy Scout meeting and handed them out to us. And our instructions were to take them home, plant them, water them, and bring our plants back in a few weeks' time. And one of us, there would be one prize given out for the tallest plant and another prize given out for the weirdest mutation. And so we all participated in that project. And my plants died because I'm that kind of guy. I am the notorious black thumb. But we got both kinds of plants, both sort of fully normal-looking corn plants and other plants that were not identifiable as corn by anyone who's ever seen corn, and we had all seen it. So that's what it was like growing up in my town, and it's an interesting and touching thing about that place that I didn't realize how weird that was until I had left that town and gone off to places where, when I would tell stories like that, people would look at me in a very funny way. Thank you.
You know, when I was a kid, I worked at a folk festival, and I love music, although I'm not very musical. And I remember specifically a few events where the best musicians in the festival would be asked to improvise. And it was amazing because you'd see the first one, and it would just blow you away. And then you think, oh, the poor second guy. And they'd blow you away. And what you watched was this incredible buzz of talent and excitement, because each person was excited by the person before them. And you know, when I put this together, we had no plans. I just thought, we'll wait and see what happens. And I hope that you felt the same buzz that I felt on this stage. It was just amazing. Now, what we're going to do, I've decided that there's no need for us to discuss anymore between ourselves, from what I've heard. So we will take a break, and we're going to go directly to the questions from the audience, because I think I'd like you to have a chance to interact with these people, and I'm in awe of them. And let's thank them once again. Excellent. Okay, we've selected, they've been great questions, and we won't have time to get through all of them, but we'll see what we can do. And I'm going to, some of them are directed at individual people, most of them aren't. And so I'll just throw it open, and people can answer for each one. This one, the first one we'll start with, I think it's an interesting one. It says, from Anne, if you could give us all a one-word piece of advice for our own science storytelling, what would it be? And P.S., thanks for showing us how sexy science is. I don't think that referred to your shirt, but it's okay. So, that we can probably do. One word, I guess we can go across, or if you want. Well, you don't have to be everyone. Anyone want to give a one-word piece of advice? Yes, go ahead.
Algebra. Learn algebra.
Ooh. I got one word. Yep.
I got one word. That one word is ambition. That is something not encoded by any practicing exam in the school system. Yet, in fact, if you look at the most successful people there ever were, they are not the ones necessarily who got straight A's. Those are the ones who had ambition, which overrides it all.
Yeah, okay. I agree. It's a long word, but it's a good one. I would say passion. I think, in the terms of storytelling, too many people, we said this last night too, too many people, I think, are afraid to inject their own story or their own passion when they're talking about it as science. But if you don't talk about what you're interested in, no one else is going to be interested in it.
Empathize.
What?
Empathize, because the best people, the best teachers of science and the best writers about science are the ones who can empathize with people who don't quite get it yet.
I was going to say the same thing.
Anyone else want to throw anything? You've been jumping ahead? No?
I would just say...
Richard. Yeah.
What?
I was going to say emphasizing exactly for the same reason, but I'll say instead poetry then.
Poetry. Excellent. Excellent. Anyone? Don't have
I would
to.
just say that you should be able to tell it so that your mother can understand it.
Hey, that's good. My mother never listens, but it's okay.
And if your mother's a theoretical physicist?
yeah, that's right. That's right.
She should tell you then.
All right, fine. Thanks.
Okay, here's one that's actually a little bit related to what ´niːl was just talking about, but I think we can expand on it. Anita says, I've always wanted to be an astronautical engineer, but I am horrible at math, but I've got lots of passion. Can this dream ever be a reality, and where do I start? So it's an interesting, I guess I'll start with that. I mean, I think, as Bill said, math is the language of science, and I think you have to be able to be adept at it.
Math is the language of the universe.
Yes, you're right. I agree with you.
Brian?
I agree, but let me just finish, and then we can. Too many people think that you have to be a mathematical wizard to be even a physicist. I mean, much less an engineer. But it takes all types. I know people who've won the Nobel Prize. I know people. You don't have to be the best mathematician in your class. You don't have to be a whiz. It takes all types to do science, and that any stereotype just doesn't work. If you're interested, do it.
What's that have to do with you knowing Nobel laureates?
Who were not the best in their class.
Oh, fine, thank you. Okay.
And who weren't necessarily even that strong in math.
Okay.
But the other thing, I'll just say, you say you're bad at math. I bet you're not that bad. And I just want to remind you that when it comes to math, there's no substitute for practice. It sucked for me. It sucks for, you just have to practice. So when you come to me and say, oh, I'm bad at math, I'm open-minded, of course, but skeptical. I'll bet you can do it, whoever you are.
That's an important point. We were talking about it last night, too, and it touches on what you said. I like science museums often because they show science as fun, but science is hard work, like anything, to do, like music, like anything else, to do it well. And it takes a lot of work. So and if you don't enjoy it, you can't do the work. But just enjoyment alone isn't enough. You've really got to be willing to work at it.
I think what's really going on here is people presume that in order to be good at, they presume that if the math is not coming easy, that therefore you'll never learn it. And I meant it literally, that math is the language of the universe, and it's like any other language, especially a language that does not share the Roman alphabet. So, for example, if you wanted to study Chinese, it looks completely intractable at first.
It looks like Greek.
Exactly. And you can ask the question, how long does it take one to become fluent in Chinese if you're not Chinese yourself? And so it can take years, 5 years, almost 10 years if you never go to China. You go to China maybe 5 years of intensive exposure, and you've never done that with math. Imagine that level of exposure to math, what kind of fluency you would have at the other end of that pipeline. So at least give yourself the opportunity that any person learning a foreign language would give themselves before you turn around and say you're not good at math.
Brian,
Get me started.
yeah, you don't want to get him started. I know that from experience. You're a professor of math as well as physics, probably the only one on the table.
Yeah, and the question that comes to mind for me is, how do you know that math is the language of the universe?
I was going to say, what about the multi?
The universe told me.
Pretty good first approximation, I'll tell you.
Now,
Okay, we're now doing science by revelation.
Lawrence,
but-
before you go, I'm
yeah.
just wondering, because I have a question about this.
Yeah.
Could you imagine that one day far in the future we encounter some alien civilization and they say, hey, show us what you've done to understand the universe, and we bring out our math books with all our theorems in physics, and they turn to them and say, math? we tried that. Yeah, it takes you just so far. And the real way to do it is like this.
I would say that whatever that real way is not manifest to us at this moment. And until that day happens, where an alien tells us how backwards we are, all I can say is that the math that we did invent out of our human brain, as you surely know, Eugene Wigner said, the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in describing the universe, the fact that it works at all is sufficient enough for me.
But here I want to have a note.
Just because you still can't figure out your string theory, don't come crying to me. Don't come crying to me just because you can't figure it out.
No, in fact,
you got him started. See, you got him started.
Said don't get me started.
Don't get him started.
No, but I want to go on record.
He warned you not to get him started.
Yeah, I know, I told you. But I want to go on record. I want to go on record, and this is a momentous occasion. I want to go on record as agreeing with Brian.
Is anybody keeping the record?
But no, in the sense that it is fascinating if you're a theoretical physicist to wonder when you find something fascinating, whether some mathematical formalism fascinating, whether it's a property of our brains or whether it's a property of the universe, and we just don't know. I think is the answer. If string
right,
theory
but let me ask you a
straight,
question. I find it slightly confusing because πνίλ, you describe math as something that we create. So why is it the thing that we create is somehow intrinsic to the universe?
Isn't that awesome?
Our description.
It's remarkably surprising.
I don't lose sleep over that. I celebrate it.
It's a good thing. I celebrate it too.
Yeah, but it is a question. There may be limitations on understanding the universe because of the way our brains work, and I think
that's surely the case. That's surely the case.
And for Republicans, it's already happened. But it's no, but seriously, that's an interesting question, and we really have to wonder about that. And if you're again working as some of us are at the forefront of physics, you wonder at some point when it's going to end.
It's some Republicans.
Yeah.
Well, but to the questioner's question, I wouldn't worry about the possibility that mathematics is going to turn out to be ineffective in describing the universe, and use that as a reason to not keep practicing. And press on.
That's right. Okay, next question.
Could be an engineering perspective.
Yeah, no, there you go. Excellent. Next question from Joel. What do you believe or hope will be the most significant scientific advancement over the next few decades? And I know I have a pat answer to this, but I'll wait to see if anyone else has one. No?
We don't know what the next most significant scientific discovery is going to be, for crying out loud.
Exactly. The point I always say, if I knew what
why are you guys exploring Mars? What are you going to find there? We don't know. That's why we're going.
Yeah.
Crying out loud.
Great. And as a
Wait. That's not
go
fair.
on.
Wait. No, there are two kinds of exploration. One of them is I have no idea what I'm looking for, but maybe I'll find it when I see it.
Okay.
Another kind of explanation.
You can't argue with him. I've learned it.
Another kind of exploration is we think we know what's going on, and we want to test our hypotheses. That's another kind of exploration. And one of them is there life somewhere else? We know there's life in at least one place in the universe, and that's called Earth. So what I want to do is go to the frozen surface of Jupiter's moon Europa, cut a hole, go ice fishing down there, put a submersible, see if something swims up to the camera and licks the lens. That's what I want to look for.
Yeah.
Look for life.
Life. But Neil, you were looking for something. When was the last time you just went, I hope to discover something? No, you're always looking for something.
No, but whenever we look for something, we are often surprised. And I think that the point is that if we really could anticipate the progress of science, it almost, in some sense, wouldn't be worth doing, because it means we'd already kind of know where we're going and what the answers are. And I think so when people ask me, what's the next great thing, I say, if I knew, I'd be doing it right now. And so I think there is this sense we are driven by questions, interesting questions, but often those questions lead us to answers that lead to more interesting questions that are totally different than the ones we came
I
up
say
with.
not just often, but most times.
Yeah, so I think that...
But you can say something about the question which you really would wish to know the answer to. And, I mean, for me, it would be what's consciousness? Because that's totally baffling.
Richard, you know what I think?
I agree.
Not that you asked, but what I think on this is consciousness has kind of baffled us for a while, okay? And evidence that we haven't a clue about what consciousness is drawn from the fact of how many books are published on the topic, right? We're not really continuing to publish books, not really, on, like, Newtonian physics. It's done, all right? So the fact that people keep publishing books on consciousness is the evidence we don't know anything about it, because if we knew all about it, you wouldn't have to keep publishing. So what I wonder, Richard, is whether there really is no such thing as consciousness at all, and that there's some other understanding of the functioning of the human brain that renders that question obsolete.
To that, I got to say, like, oh, wow.
Perfect. Okay.
And am I like thinking, or am I just like thinking that I'm thinking? Wow.
Will you stop with that?
Richard, we went decades not understanding the precession of Mercury. It was this big mystery, and we invented solutions to it, like a mysterious planet Vulcan tugging on it such that it's perihelion precessed. And that wasn't the explanation at all. It was obviously general relativity, another thing, not the original question we were asking. So you say you want to know what consciousness is. Maybe that's not even the right question.
How about this? What's the nature of consciousness?
Excellent. Okay, let's move on. Actually, Tracy, I think I want to direct this one to you.
Who's you?
To Tracy. That's not ʻniːl.
I'll be happy.
Okay.
Get back.
Okay.